Welcome to Green Building Matters, the original and most popular podcast focused on the green building movement. Your host is Charlie Cicchetti, one of the most credentialed experts in the green building industry and one of the few to be honored as a lead fellow. Each week, Charlie welcomes a green building professional from around the globe to share their war stories, career advice, and unique insight into how sustainability is shaping the built environment. So settle in, grab a fresh cup of coffee, and get ready to find out why green building matters.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. I've got the easy job. Once a week, I interview a green building professional somewhere in the world. I'm based in Atlanta, and our guest today, he's here in Atlanta too, was introduced through a mutual friend, someone that's been on the podcast, one of my colleagues, Brian Bollinger. But today we've got JasonPerez. He's the CEO and co-founder at YARDZ. He does a bunch of other really cool stuff too. I know today we're going to talk everything from construction technology, arguably an industry that hasn't really innovated as much as we needed to. We might put out a state-of-the-art building, but what about the process? How do you innovate and apply some technology to even the construction process? We'll talk entrepreneurship and we'll talk green building. So, Jason, thanks for being on. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on here, Charlie. I'm excited to be on. I've listened to the podcast, and you always have great guests. So, no pressure on me, right?
You're going to do great. You even got a great microphone. So, hey, for all my guests, I say, hey, take us back. A little of your origin story. Where did you grow up and go to school?
Yeah, so I grew up on the West Coast in the high desert of California. So about northeast of Los Angeles in a little town called Palmdale, Lancaster. I went to grade school there. Spent a lot of my time in Los Angeles because that's where our family grew up. My grandmother on my father's side was one of 13 kids that they got out of Cuba as refugees. And so, a lot of our weekends was spent with all the Cuban family and these big barbecues and somebody's birthday, somebody's wedding, somebody's funeral, something was going on all the time. So, but then we'd retreat back to the high desert where we can get on a dirt bike and ride straight out of our garage and into the desert, and there was nothing, right? So you would drive to LA, there's smog everywhere, and then you would go up to the high desert and it was beautiful blue skies and, just landscaped mountains with pines and red rock, right?
Whoa, man, what a great visual, and that connection to outdoors at a young age. I just visited for a conference, Tampa, Florida. I didn't realize the Cuban influence there too, man. That was a lot of fun. So let's see, you got a double major there in college. So, you want to stick around California? What was going through your head, that decision making? Hey, what do I want to do when I grow up? What was that like?
Well, my goal early on, I knew what I wanted to do. There was the dream of becoming an intelligence officer in the Marine Corps, and that's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to be. I played baseball. I did fairly okay. Yeah, I guess I might or might not had the skills. If you asked me today, I would tell you I didn't have the skills to make it to the major leagues. But back then, every kid dreams, right, to play baseball up there. And being Cuban, that's another big deal, right? If you're from the Caribbean, you play baseball, then you kind of feel like it's in your blood. It's in your culture. So I went to school, and my junior year, I actually applied into the Marine Corps for OCS. And sure enough, I got medically declined, which was a huge hit because since I was 8 years old, I wanted to go to the Marine Corps, and that's what I wanted to do with my life. And from there, it was a scramble. And, I'm an honest person. I had a little bit of depression, a little bit of, woe is me. What am I going to do with my life? And being lost for 6 to 12 months. And after that, my dad pretty much said, look, I'm in construction. Your brother's in construction. We're all in construction. Like, just go back to the roots, get in there, dig in, you'll figure something out. And that's what I did. And I fought it for about 3 years. I thought, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do something different. And then when you realize when I don't fight and I apply myself, I can really be good at this. And if I'm really good at it, I can actually even enjoy it. And that's essentially how I got into the market. Maybe it was more destined by God than it was, by design on my part.
Well, it's funny how he can work. And man, thank you for sharing that story. I'm sure there's many of us listening that have had those kind of setbacks, and it hits. You had a plan, and there's a big curveball there. All right. So construction, you've got that in the family there, and you get these degrees, maybe early in the career, sticking around construction. But, let us know two things. What else was happening early in your career? But when did sustainability, if at all, when did it first kind of show up for you?
It's funny. Being from a refugee family, sustainability, I think, is just ingrained in you. It's kind of like that generation that went through the Great Depression and maybe even their kids that saw some of that. You kind of save everything. You do things yourself. Everything has a purpose. You try not to waste. You're not spending the money just to be a consumer, right? Everything's intentional. You're frugal. And I think, refugees and children of refugees have a different mindset, right? And, I got an education in this, from my grandparents and from my parents, because they came to this country and, with nothing, not even speaking the language, and they applied themselves and they believed in, the opportunity that this great country gave them, and they were successful because of it. And all of these other things that came with it, like I said, the mindset of, hey, we don't just buy things and we're not wasteful, and we take care of the land that we own and we take care of the things that we have. A lot of times when we think of sustainability, so many people want to jump to these big, grandiose, exciting, technologies, or they immediately think of wind turbines and solar and electric cars and, all this technology. But for me, sustainability has always gone back to this old school of, let's start with reduce, right? Like, if we can reduce overall, we're already starting. We don't need to think about the Band-Aid, about the pills to fix the symptoms. We're just getting rid of the unhealthiness in general, right? We're starting with healthy habits. And so I think that was ingrained, right, from my grandparents and my parents and how they lived their life.
I've heard that from others that have come here to the U.S. and just that resourcefulness, right? And you're right, that is sustainability. And who knows, some of that might have even what led you to start your company. How about mentors? You mentioned your parents, your grandparents, even in your career. Sometimes a mentor, right, Jason, is someone we actually have access to. Sometimes it's just someone we know their work, we look up to, we read a book, take the seminar. But did you have any mentors in your career?
Yeah, early on, you're right. The family was the first, right? I looked up to my grandfather, who was an entrepreneur and taught me things like, he was a landscaper. And he said, look, I can go down to my neighbor's house in my neighborhood and I can sell them mowing their lawn for $10, or I can drive to Beverly Hills and charge them $100. And so he kind of taught me opportunity cost, right? My grandmother, who was really my mentor spiritually, and actually my logo for my first consulting firm had a dove and a serpent in there because she used to quote a Bible verse that had both those in them, right? And my father, who started his electrical contracting company. And those are my early kind of mentors of professional and spiritual. And then once I got out of that nest, Tim Cannon, I went to go work for him. He was the first construction guy that I went to go work for. And I actually was a laborer. So I was in college. I was digging holes, breaking down, demoing stuff. I mean, it was the worst jobs you can think of. I mean, sewer pipes, whatever it was, I got the crappiest job, pun intended, on the job site. And it was interesting. I graduated college and immediately he said, hey, why don't we try you as an assistant superintendent? And then about 6 months later, he goes, I think you can handle your own job. Let's put you as a superintendent. And then about 6 months later, he goes, man, you did calculus in high school. Why are you out you should be managing money for us. And then he put me as a project manager, right? And the thing that was so gracious, he was so gracious. Sometimes my English gets messed up here. I was so grateful to him is that he always saw something bigger in me than what I was doing. He never saw, hey, I put him as superintendent. He's doing great. He's a superintendent. That's what he is. He saw potential and he gave me opportunity, right? And that is something that I carry with me even to today. I try not to limit people to where they're at today. I try to look at their potential. And after him, I met Dan Hughes, and he's the one that did the same thing and actually put me in the trajectory of business, right? Going on my own. I would have never done it without him, and him looking at the potential and going, I see you here, but I still think you can be greater than where you're at today, and I'm going to help you get there. And he mentored me through that process.
Those are fantastic mentors. And to all of our podcast listeners, who around you have that there's a little more potential in them, they just can't see it. You just got to speak some encouragement into them and say, hey, I know you can do this. Who better than you to do that thing? And man, that's pretty cool. That's pretty powerful. All right, let's piece together a little more of that early career, and then we'll get over to the consulting and the technology company. So Cannon Building Services, Siska Hennessy, so construction, project management. I guess that's what got you to Atlanta. Is that right? With Siska Hennessy? Is that how you came to Georgia?
Yeah, that's correct. So after Cannon Building, I ended up making a lateral move to Siska Hennessy Group, who's international engineering, and at the time had a construction arm. And I was 25 years old. They threw me on a project. And sure enough, about a year later, they put me on the largest project, probably one of the riskiest projects they ever had, to be the senior construction manager, nobody above me. 26 years old. I don't even know why they did it. I was just fortunate to be there and take it on. And it went fairly well. So about a year and a half after that, they said, we need to start an office, start running construction in the Southeast. Would you be willing to go? We've sent 2 guys out there. Both of them have not done well. And, it's your turn. And so I've always liked challenges. Like I was, as you mentioned, there's double major. One of my majors was economics. And I did that because we had a retired MIT professor that when I took his first exam, I didn't know I got the highest grade, but apparently I got the highest grade in class, and it was a C-. And I told the guy, I was like, hey, buddy, something's wrong here. C-, this is not what happens. And he said, why are you so upset? You got an A on the test. And I said, no, it says 71%. That's not an A. But I love challenges. So they sent me out here to Atlanta, essentially going, all right, 2 people have failed. Let's see what you can do in this market. And we were successful in the market. It went really well. I did that for a couple of years before, again, going back to my mentor, Dan Hughes, and him encouraged me to go do it on my own.
Yeah, man. Who better than you? Let's go, Atlanta. So you stuck around, and you've been here a while now. So as you look back on your, where you're at so far in life and business, what are some of your proudest accomplishments?
Professionally, one of my proudest things is just saying yes, right, to all the opportunities, and then later. So that was probably my proudest achievements early. Is just rising to every opportunity that was there, saying yes, even if I wasn't completely comfortable, even if I didn't know if I can do it. I went in saying, hey, I'm giving it my best shot, right? Later in my career, I say that the proudest achievement is after 8 years of building a pretty successful project management consulting firm, doing work all over the world, Saudi and Guantanamo Bay and so forth, and having a big group of project managers in the company. It was walking away. That's probably one of my proudest achievements. And that's because I had my second son, and I realized that my family and my kids were the most important thing in my life. And I didn't want to, sacrifice those things for professional success. And that was a very, very hard decision. But, for those listeners out there, I think it's something that all of us have to continually look at. We're going to spend more time working than anywhere else. That's just a fact. Right. But at some point you have to decide, is there a detriment to something in my life that I really want to prioritize? And undoubtedly I was looking going, I'm not, seeing all the firsts of my kids that I want to see. I'm not getting to be involved with everything that I want to get involved with. And I'm so thankful that I made that decision early to where I was able to, coach my kids' first baseball teams, right? Or T-ball teams, and to be at every single practice and to be at every single, recital type, thing at school. And, so from a professional standpoint, I think that's my proudest, achievements. From a personal standpoint, I got to give more credit to my wife than me, but I am really proud of who our kids are. I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, and they're kind, they're hardworking, they're intelligent. And honestly, they're going to achieve so much more than me. I mean, already they're smarter than me. And there's so much that they do. And I look and I go, and they are much greater than the sum of my wife and I. They're amazing.
Love that, man. I love being a dad. Let's put kids in the world. They're going to do really good things, So
that's right.
Sounds
that's
like
right.
That bold move, right? And then starting your own business. Did you already know, like, hey, one day I really want to have my own business, or you want to be an entrepreneur? Did you always know that?
I did. I knew even when, I started early with like trying to start a dog poop picking up business when I was, a kid in grade school.
I see a couple around Atlanta. You were just early in there.
Yeah. I was too early. And I also didn't like doing it. So I would never show up for work. All right. I had like a couple neighbors that would pay me to go around and go to their house and pick it up. And more than not, my parents would get a call like, hey, did Jason come over and pick up? Because it looks like he hasn't picked up for a while. And then my mom would come in and ask me, and I'm like, no, I forgot. And so it was my first major failure in business. And I've had more than one failure in business. And that was my first one. And I tell people, when it comes to business, money's great, but you got to match it with your passion, and if you can do that, picking up dog poop apparently is not my passion. So, that's.
Got that one out of the way early. Thanks for sharing, man. These are great stories. That's what this is about, a peek into your journey. So let's kind of get us to present day. But you, as I understand it, you did a lot of consulting, you may still do, and project management, but that's really what started one of your first ventures there, and Veritas. If there's anything to add there, what kind of projects you still work on or companies you work with. And then I can't wait to hear all about YARDZ and your tech startup. So if you would kind of bring us up to present day.
Yeah. So the consulting company, we were focused primarily on mission critical construction. So it was data center, biotech, and healthcare. And a lot of our healthcare was existing facility. And I think, again, when we start talking about sustainability, there's a whole entire section within green building that's talking about IAQ and what it's like to have a healthy building. And, one of the things that we staked out, we wrote policies even for hospitals, was all around infection control, right? How do you do construction and operating facility? How do you keep it safe when someone's performing, neurosurgery or heart surgery right next door and you're renovating an OR on the other side of the wall? Or, how do you operate with a NICU right above that? These children are not just sensitive to, environmental, air type pollutants, but just noise, right? They're so delicate that if you have some extreme noise that can startle them, it can put them into cardiac arrest, right? So you're in these environments, you're doing this construction, and the meaning of construction in those environments are far deeper. The risk, right? The drive behind being successful, there's just so much more substance to what you're doing around construction when you're in a hospital and you're doing it with people's lives on the line. So, it was a great company. I feel like we absolutely did fantastic work. There's still some stuff that we're doing out there, but most of my time, over 95% of my time is all driven around YARDZ, the tech company that we started in 2018. And that really kind of evolved by itself as well, because we were really focused on aggregating rentals, giving contractors the ability to see all the things that they have out in the field. And that grew into not just rentals, but contractors be able to see the rented and owned assets next to each other. And honestly, when we started, it was just about building a tool that would make it easy for people, right? To create a better quality of life for these equipment managers. But after time, we started seeing that there was this grand impact, right, to sustainability around the company, that we could reduce rentals by, 10 to 30%. And people look and they go, well, why does that even matter to sustainability? Well, if I'm not ordering a piece of equipment, that means it doesn't get loaded. It doesn't get driven, through downtown or anywhere else in the world and unloaded somewhere else. We don't end up with two pieces of equipment being put on a project, ran simultaneously when they don't need to be running simultaneously. We don't, there's all these components around it they get reduced. And then when you put that piece of equipment next to owned assets, right? To where people are starting to use their own assets instead of rentals. Now you can start to reduce maybe the overall demand of equipment altogether. Now, equipment manufacturers, might not believe that's ever possible, and people might not think that's possible, but the reality is it happens, right? And then if you can help people maintain that equipment longer, and now instead of buying a new piece of equipment every 3 years or every 5 years, they can get a little longer. Again, sometimes the most sustainable vehicle is the one that you keep driving, right? It's kind of like sometimes the most sustainable shirt you wear is the one that, you don't buy. I think people are starting to see, back to my, refugee family, that reduce, reuse, recycle, like reduction is so important. And today we gloss over reduction. We just gloss over reduction. And when you talk about construction, right, there's a bunch of different estimates of what the carbon footprint is. Some people say it's 400 megatons of CO2 annually, right? And that excavators alone account for 50% of those emissions. Now, if we can help people reduce the idle time, we're talking idle time of excavators, right? And we can reduce these excavators just sitting there running when they shouldn't be running by 10%. And excavators are 50%. That's 5% of construction carbon footprint, right? Of construction machinery, I should say, not construction machinery. And that's a huge impact, right? And that's just reduction. It's so important. So when our customers are getting on and we have IoT devices tracking utilization on their own assets, and they can see what's idle in real time on a map or in a dashboard, and they can reduce that 10%, that's sustainability, right? And I get it. People like to think about, let's get electric excavators. Let's get this, let's get that. If we're still inefficient, which, 5 years ago I was at an event, and I think it was the economist of AGC said that construction is only 40% efficient, right? So the other 60% is stuff that's not getting done that should be getting done. We got a major issue, right? We've got to fix efficiency first, because all we're going to do is get battery-driven excavators and have them drain a battery and then charge them on electrical grids, which could be produced by anything, right? Could be fossil, could be hydro, could be any number of things. But it all starts with reduce. Reduce, reduce, reduce. And we got to get better at that. And if you don't have the tools to do it, then you're not going to do it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Sometimes reduce, reuse, recycle, we skip past, and you're supposed to do them in that order. So what a fresh reminder here, Jason, you're giving us. And then, a whole fleet. I mean, I compare it to a building. We got to start with efficiency first. But one thing your team obviously and your technology does is measure, right? But as they say, you can't manage what you don't measure. So you're doing all of that. So who are your typical customers? Is it contractors, subcontractors? Who's buying from YARDZ?
Yeah, it's contractors. So we do have some of the largest contractors in the country, several of the top 20 contractors off the ENR magazines. And we have some of the largest utility contractors, subcontractors. I mean, everybody's got equipment somewhere. They're either renting it or they're owning it. So contractors are our primary market. We, however, do have some prop tech type customers that look and go, hey, we need to maintain our air handlers. We need to maintain our, generators and cooling towers and chillers and so forth. And our system's really agnostic to the asset. They can be dynamic driving around and fleet vehicles like trucks. They can be yellow iron, or they can be static type assets that are sitting in building infrastructure, right? The idea is, can you track it? Can you maintain it? What does it take to ensure that it's running efficiently?
Yeah, the whole world of smart buildings, IoT, and some of your technology you probably didn't know could be used in that way, and now it is. Yeah. What else do we need to know about building a tech startup in the construction industry? Any advice for someone that wants to go down that path?
You have to have a lot of Pepto-Bismol, I guess. Maybe that's the first prerequisite. When you're a construction guy and you get into tech, it's a completely different story. My background in construction is you set up a schedule, you get all the people around the table. Even if it's a renovation, you're hitting your targets, right? You're anticipating what could go wrong. Yeah, there might be some change orders. Yeah, there might be some unforeseens, but you're managing around that and you're keeping schedule. You get into tech, and tech is just a different culture. It really is. I build so many schedules around the things that we're doing. And I'm in, groups of other CEOs and CTOs that I meet with. And it's a cultural thing. I mean, it's just like tech just doesn't run on the same schedule as construction. It just doesn't. I think our company comes the closest to it because of our background. So if somebody's going out and going, hey, I want to start a tech company. It sounds so great and so wonderful. Just estimate it's going to take about 3 to 4 times longer than you think to build what you want to build. It's going to cost maybe 4 to 5 times more than what you think it's going to cost. And most importantly, don't build what you think needs to be built. We learned this MVP and iteration process that really still sticks with us today. If we're going to do a new feature, we build, and for those people out there, MVP means minimal viable product. What product can you put out there, put it in somebody's hands so they can play around with it? It is, when you say minimal, my first minimal viable product that I went into one of our advisors and spoke to about, he said, this is like a final product. I'm like, no, the final product has this and that. And he's like, nah, let me tell you how to do this. And he stripped our first budget from like $150,000 build to $11,000 build. And that's how minimal you have to be able to think to be efficient in the tech world. And so those are 2 things I would say, right? Expect it to be longer, expect it to cost more. Build an MVP and let your customers drive, right? Paying customers drive the direction of where that tech needs to go. Because we're not the ones, right? The founder, the CEO, the CTO, the CEO, the product guy, we're not the ones to know where things go. The market dictates where things should go. The market will pay for things that are valuable to the market. And so listen to them, right? Have no ego, because the ego is the enemy of progress for you when it comes to building a tech company.
Oh, I'm glad I asked. I'm taking notes here myself. A lot of wisdom there, man. Shoot, that was great. Let's talk about the future. I love to ask someone like you just, hey, what gets you excited about the future? What's coming at us maybe in this construction technology world or the sustainability world? What are you kind of reading up on? What do you think's coming down the road?
There's what I think and what I hope. What I think, we're going to stop thinking in absolutes and extreme, right? This idea of we're all going to be in electric cars by 2035, and we're all going to do this, and we're all going to do that, and everything's going to be solar, and time and time again. And this isn't like just recent history, although we've seen this in recent history. This goes back centuries. These extremes are not healthy, right? We've got to think in what, I would say are mixed solutions, because mixed solutions is where we're going to get to if we want to get anywhere, right? And the idea of a hybrid vehicle still, I think, is one of the most effective vehicles that are out there, right? I mean, I had a Prius, one of the first Prius when they came out, and I love that thing. And I wish I would have never sold it. At the time I sold it to one of my project managers. He still has it, actually. The thing runs forever, still gets 50 miles to the gallon of the cheapest gas you can throw in it, right? And it's going to be on the road forever. And then you start, looking at some of these other solutions and, seeing what's going on in the cold weather up north and charging stations and this, that. And, everybody wants, again, think in these extremes because they're so easy to think in, but it's a lazy way to think. What we need to think is, what's the healthy mix, right? If me living my own life, it's not good to live in extremes or absolutes, then why would it be good in sustainability? Why would it be good in a business? Why would it be good in anything that we apply, whether in our professional or personal lives, right? We've got to look and go, it's okay, right? Maybe it's okay to have fossil fuels and sustainability together. Maybe we have to just be at a place where we're nurturing and being good stewards of what's in front of us. And again, hopefully, so I said there's what I hope and where I think it's going to go. I think it's going to go where we stop thinking in absolutes and we're starting to hear conversations. People that used to be very extreme are starting to go, well, maybe it's okay to have a mix. But my hope goes back to, I really hope that reduce. I'm saying this over and over again on the podcast because I'm trying to drive a point. I really hope we go in that direction. I hope that people, when we look and we order a toothbrush that comes in 5 different boxes from Amazon, that we look and we go, that is a bad way for us to live. Tech, in that scenario, tech is not the solution. We should run as fast as we can away from technology when we're ordering a toothbrush with 5 different boxes, from Amazon, right? Like that is, there's nothing sustainable about that.
Man, think versus hope. I'd like to hope we do get there. I think you have a good handle on what's really happening in the world and what's a fair mix? It's, there's been some countries that have entirely gotten off of certain power sources and, they should have gradually phased them out. And you could go make up a lot of these. But you said it, get back to reduction first. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And Charlie, I would say, and I don't know if I'm allowed to ask questions back, but, I wonder, what if less tech is the answer, right? I own a tech company and I believe that good is coming from it because I'm trying to reduce something, right? The tech is driven to reduce something, but what if tech is forcing people to consume more, right? When should we look and say, in this case, tech is not good, right? I don't know if we ask ourselves that question enough. We get infatuated and think that anything that's tech is sustainable, but scooters dragged all over the city, over every city, obviously manufacturing those and all the precious metals extracted, this, that, and the other. I mean, at some point, it seemed like the goal of making money was more important than sustainability.
You're right. Yeah, the scooters, I think sometimes don't even last a year. They've thrown away recycled. There's a lot of examples. But I think, on the consumer side, right? The online shopping, the social media, and there's just a lot of things there. I'm a fan of maybe AI trying to help us understand the sustainability problem, do the calculations, catch the trends, and help us make some better decisions. So I'm hopeful on that side too.
That's a perfect example, Charlie. That's a perfect example. Building AI, right? You know all about this. I mean, this is you all day long. Building AI to reduce that design burden, to get to better solutions, to give you more options, to streamline that process, because it's going to help you get to a better answer, right?
Yes.
If it's not doing that, maybe we should second guess.
Yeah.
Right.
And you don't let it make the entire decision. You let it help you guide, speed up your decision making, save you some time, automate some of it. And so we got a lot of similarities. And even when that early project manager tapped me too for a construction project, I didn't know why they picked me to run too. So we'll have to catch up, grab some coffee soon.
That's right.
Let's get to know what kind of helps you stay as a high performer here. So what would you say is your specialty or gift?
So it wasn't until recent that somebody pegged me down. It was about 2.5 years ago. And I think they summed me up because I always felt like I was a compassionate person. But then some people would come to me and say, man, your expectations are so high of everybody. And, they summed it up in one sentence. They said, "You're the nicest a-hole I've ever met." Right? That was their word to me. And I said, okay, so what does that mean? I said, well, I can tell that you like really, really care about me, right? You care about everything, whether it's professional or personal. Like you seem so vested in who I am, but man, like you're constantly expecting more of me, right? And, you know, some people might say it's a bad thing, but I feel like that's a gift, right? For people to see that you genuinely care, right? You want well-being for them, the best well-being for them. And you want them to reach their potential, and you hold them accountable in a compassionate way, right? Like, I think that's a gift of mine. And some people, you know, would look and say he's too hard. Other people will say he cares too much. And that feels good to me. Because if one group is saying one thing and the other group is saying the other thing, then again, you know, it's lazy way of thinking. People like to think in extremes and absolutes. It must mean that I live somewhere in between. And for me, that feels like it's probably my specialty. I like to bring the greatest of people out of themselves. I want them to reach their potential. I want them to feel like there is no limit. And I'm going to drive that out of them, hopefully in a positive way. Right? When they leave, they go, Jason cared about me. And I feel like I'm in a better place today than when I came into the company. And every person that's ever left a company that I ran, that's been my goal. And I've been joyful and happy to see them go to better places. It doesn't bother me at all. Am I sad to lose somebody? Yes. But I'm excited about where they're going. It's like when a kid moves out of your house, right? That hasn't happened to me, but I got to imagine they're growing. You're seeing the maturity, the success of what you've done to nurture them. And yes, it's terrible walking into that empty bedroom, but how awesome is it when they call you and say, you know, they got their first job, right? They found their first apartment. That's a really neat experience.
I can tell this specialty, this gift that has a common thread. You probably give a lot of benefit of the doubt. You're looking for the best in others. Some of what you said earlier, I think it's authenticity here, and it's good stuff. It reminds me, just recently, I was at a business conference, and they had a quote I'd seen before. I hadn't seen it in a while. It's Maya Angelou, and the quote goes, she said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel."
Yeah.
It's good stuff, man.
Yeah, that's great.
A couple more here. Let's see. How about habits or routines? Got any pro tips around that? What keeps you?
You know, I wish I was one of those guys that consistently had this great routine like Jocko Willink or something that woke up at 4:30 in the morning, worked out, and then did this and then did that. And they were really routine. I am about as gypsy as can be when it comes to routines. There are days where I wake up at 4 a.m. and start working. There are days where I'll work through till 4 a.m., right? And part of that's just being a father because you're going to practices or you're trying to hang out with your wife and, you know, play rummy at night or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. And you're working your work schedule around family schedules so that you're giving the best you, right? In those moments with them. The only thing I'm consistent with probably is, man, from morning till night, I'm talking to God all day, right? I am literally, that is just my conversation. And I'm trying to understand what I can control, what I can't control, and try to just trust that there's a bigger plan, right? Much bigger than my own plan. And any bad news, any closed paths, anything that goes wrong, I gotta believe it's just simply directing me in the right path, in the right direction to reach the goal that I need to get. You know, I would have been a Marine, right? There's so many other things that I would have done and I could have placed. And, you know, I would have stayed with Veritas full time if, you know, I would have had my plan initially, and all these things just changed. Life changes. And when you're willing to accept that sometimes the bad news is in order to take you to good places, it just makes your days a little bit easier. And running a company, you're going to have a lot of bad news. It's just part of it. It just is. But that's really okay.
It is okay. And it sounds like you have that conversation on a daily basis, man. I love that. Thank you for sharing. It's really cool. So as we get to know each other more, I'm a fan of a bucket list. Not everybody has a bucket list, but if you had a bucket list, what are one or two things on the bucket list? Any adventure, travel, you want to write a book? I don't know. What's on the bucket list?
So I wrote a book. I haven't published it yet. It's been sitting forever. And I keep on telling myself I'm going to actually publish it. And it just sits in a folder on my computer.
A great editor. His name's Brian. So let him give it a read through.
Actually, I should have him read it. I had it edited by our PR firm. They actually did it pro bono and I rewrote it like 5 times because of their editing. But you're right. I probably should give it to Brian and let him just beat it up and blow holes through it all over the place. One of my goals, I think, is to maybe, it's going to sound crazy, but from a bucket list standpoint, to go a month with like 0 electronics, no computer, no phone, no nothing, and in nature, right? Like not 0 electronics because I'm in a hospital, not able to do anything. Like 0 electronics in a nice environment, right? Whether I'm in a cabin, whether I'm on I guess yacht wouldn't count, but a yacht in the Caribbean would be awesome. Maybe a sailboat in the Caribbean, right? That counts as 0 electronics. Just completely, because I think, again, we're inundated with so much. It's like a highway of information coming into our brain every day. And not a lot of our natural thoughts get to come out because there's just too much jamming up the highway going in. And I think that would be really something that would just nourishing to me. And then, I think the second thing would be, and it might sound cheesy, but I hope to meet my grandchildren one day. Like that's a huge bucket list for me, man. I think about how much I love my kids. And then I look at my parents with my kids and I think how cool to be grandpa. Like how cool is that? It's rare that you're not a cool grandpa, right? You can be an uncool dad, but
no, not grandpa.
It's rare. That's right. Those are 2.
What a great bucket list. Unique. I love it, man. Love it. Just a couple things as we start to wind down. I love to ask my podcast guests, is there a book you'd recommend? Doesn't have to be about buildings, just a book.
I'm trying to think of what I've read most recently.
Or a podcast or a TED Talk.
Yeah.
A little pro tip.
Well,
I kind of like this.
Yeah. So here's the thing. My favorite book is Atlas Shrugged, which I know is not always a popular book for people. But I think, coming from a family of refugees from a communist country and what was trying to be accomplished in the book, there's so many just good lessons that come through that book of really being a producer, doing the thing that you are meant to do, right? And doing it to the best of your ability and everything else coming from there. That it's not about the money, right? Even though most people read Atlas Shrugged and they're like, oh, it's about capitalism and money and this. No, it's not about that. It's about taking your talent and doing it in a way that people see the value in it, right? And so, that's probably number 1 on my list. I love Go Giver. A lot of people have read that book. It's a fantastic book. It's really short, but it's a great way to think when you start thinking about business. And sometimes we're always like, oh man, I got to do this and I got to get the upper hand and this, that, and the other. And then you start realizing, I'm just going to give and it's going to come back to me. Right. So those are 2. And people are going to go, maybe, how can you have Atlas Shrugged and Go Giver and both on the same list? But, again, we can't think in extremes, right? We got to read diverse things to end up somewhere where we're well balanced.
Yeah, and I've heard that from you throughout this interview. We'll put links to those 2 books in our podcast show notes. Everybody check those out.
That'd be awesome.
All right. So if you look back on your career, is there anything you wish you'd have known earlier? Any career advice you wish you'd have known earlier?
I was very fortunate. I had great mentors early in my career. So learning these things weren't necessarily like, man, I wish I would have learned these things earlier. The one thing maybe that I would say in regards to these mentors, right, is understanding my relationship with these mentors better earlier. I was fortunate because I constantly had kind of this feeling that was placed on me and it wasn't on purpose, but it was placed on me from my grandparents and partly by my parents as well. But they came to this country and they said, hey, we came to this country with nothing. Look at where we're at. Your father's done better. And now it's your turn, right? You're going to take the torch and you should do better than your father. So I always felt this pressure that I needed to be doing better than the generation before me. I need to take these things. And that does not mean, I'm going to emphasize this, that doesn't mean more money. That doesn't mean bigger house, right? I mean, the reason they did what they did is to give us the freedom to do the things that we love to do, that would produce meaningful life, that, for them, it was subsistence, right? Like for them, it was, I'm going to do everything I can to survive, right? I need the basic food, water, shelter. And then for my father, it was, we got food, water, shelter covered, but, we want to give a little bit to our children, right? And then for me, right, I hopefully get to spread that net further for my children and give them better capabilities to go do the things that they love and want to do and to be successful with those things. But as I go back and I look at that mentorship, I was fortunate. I kept on pushing myself all the way. But what I didn't understand is, if I would have sat there for 2 seconds and thought about mentorship, I would have realized that the fuel for a mentor is to see change in their mentee. So for the people that are out there that are looking and they're going, what type of advice? One, people want to help you. There are mentors everywhere. There are advisors everywhere. Every group, in my companies, we've always had advisory boards and never anybody, these are very successful people, have exited, big dollars, multiple companies, and they're doing it for free, right? Their payment is to see positive change, to make impacts in other people's lives. So my social currency, right, is my growth as a professional, my growth personally even, right? The company's growth. They need to see change in my life because that is what they're doing it for. They're not doing it because they make money off of it. So for the people out there, as you look and you go, what type of advice wish I would have had? Go ask somebody to mentor you and understand that the currency that you are paying them with is your growth. It's your productivity. It's your action. And if you're not taking action and you're not being productive, then you're not holding your side of the bargain and you're defaulting on payment. So find somebody that'll mentor you and then be the growth that they want to see.
Man, you got me pumped up today. You could write a whole chapter on what you just said there. That was some advice anybody's ever given on this podcast, right? Because, maybe a young professional, I feel like they have to give something. To back, what can I do for this person that's further along than me? And you just summed it up, and that's the permission, right? Sometimes in life we need that permission that no, it's not a transaction. It's not tit for tat. This is what that person is getting. It's a different currency. So I love what you just said there, man. All right, let's say someone's jumping into either the green building movement or the construction technology movement right now. Maybe they're making a later in career pivot. Maybe they're a young professional. Again, if they're just now jumping in, kind of a path you've had with some sustainability, construction technology, any words of encouragement, Jason, for them as we wrap up?
Yeah. As they used to say in I think the 80s or maybe earlier, don't drink the Kool-Aid, make your mind up yourself, get in there. Don't think in extremes. The people that are going to make the difference in this world are not the ones that are swimming in the current. If you have the same answer as everybody else in the room, then you're probably not going to make an impact because you're just flowing in the water in the same direction as everybody else. But the second you stand up, right? Everybody's in an inner tube. Everybody's floating down the river. The second you stand up, you know what's going to happen? You're going to look a lot different than everybody else, right? If you can think differently about this, I think the solutions that are really going to make a difference haven't even been thought of yet. I think there are things out there that people are going to come along and there's going to be a big movement that comes and it's not going to look like just X, Y, Z. I think it's going to look much, much, and I don't know what it is, honestly. I don't think anybody's come up with it yet, but there's going to be something that comes along that makes the biggest impact. And so if your goal is to get in there and create change, right, in a positive way, then don't swim with the current. Find your own path. Find your own way. Do research. Don't just look at everything that the industry's saying. Look at things outside of the industry. Look at things everywhere, because there's an answer there that's not an extreme. That's a mix of something. And it might be a product. It might be a way of thinking. It could be anything, but someone's going to get there, and it could be the person listening to this podcast right now.
That's encouraging, and we'll wrap on that. Man, a lot of wisdom today. Make sure everybody listening, connect with Jason on LinkedIn. Let him know what you thought of the podcast. Check out YARDZ. You might be on a construction project that needs some of this technology, but this is a podcast I would listen to again, because you really shared a lot of not just career best practices, but some life best practices, man. So thank you for spending time with us today on the Green Building Matters podcast. Hope to see you soon, Jason. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. Really appreciate it. It's been an honor.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At GBES.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to GBES.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode. And you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.